Nonsense.
Greetings, this is Warrior King, and the time has come for the lions and the lioness to tell their own story. This is the lion's voice. Give thanks and prayer.
Mm-mm. I don't hear any volume. What's going on?
What are you waiting for? Come together, calling from near and far. Know who you are. What are you waiting for? Rally up, it's Exodus. What are you waiting for? Ancestors paved the way for us. Yes, I am Ketis Oyonde, asking, what are you waiting for to come together? The time has come for the lions to tell our own story. This is the lion's voice.
Yeah, now the time has come for the lion to tell his own story. Yeah, the one them called Celestial represent for the mighty lion voice. And this a shook up your planet tectonic. As me sip up my roots and tectonic. And you can't make me jump nor get panic. Of the engine a run like mechanic room.
The time has come for the lioness to tell her own story.
The time has come for lions to tell our own story. Yes, you're listening to Lion's Voice. I is Dejazmatch hailing from the island of Tigray. Yeah, I'm bringing you Rastafari vibes. Can you feel it? Rastafari. Babylon born when Rasta come together. Can you feel it? Rastafari. Because Babylon done when I and I come together. Look how we live together, look how we work together, Oh, Babylon done when Rasta come together. Haile, Rastafari, His Majesty and Impressment and bless. Yeah man, Haile from Rastafari, Rastafari here.
Aye.
The fittest of the fittest shall survive. My people, open your eyes. Wake up. Blessed love, this is Queen Omega representing for all lions and lionesses. With the lion's voice, we come to tell our story. Rastafari, live it. Hey, the lion's voice. Rastafari.
Alright, listen to me now, people. The lion roar, no dog bark. See? The lion's voice with Kwasi Bonsu. Time right now for the lion to tell his story. See? Listen up.
Haile.
Amina, the time has come for the lioness to tell our own story. No surrender, no retreat, we are Jaja soldier. Rougher than the streets, tougher than a boulder. Bigging up Lion's Voice. Now put it, I Jalifa said that.
Greetings, this is Ras Alula. The time has come for the lions to tell their own story. See? This is the lion's voice. Keep it locked, right here, sir. Ras Alula said that. Are you satisfied? Wipe those tears from your eyes. I'm all alone, still you thought I was telling a lie. This is the lion's voice. Keep it locked, right here, sir.
I will never stop, hail the Most High, and I will never stop, call Rastafari. Blessed love, this is Kushite representing for the Lion's Voice. We are here to tell our own story, Rastafari.
Yeah, David Trent of Steel Pulse, and I'm saying hail to the lion voice because it's time that the lion have its voice, have its own story. Says I'm stepping out here. Hear me now. Oh, yeah, the lion's voice. Raw.
Lion voice. Tell them that's the people first choice. Lion voice. Make the lioness them feel nice. Lion voice. With the lion cubs we sacrifice. Lion voice. Got to show the people them the life. Lion voice.
Alright, so continuing on with us, we're going to talk about the drums right now. The bass drum is the foundation. It gives off that frequency. It encompasses and surrounds and keeps the Ayabingi within a one place. It's always on the one. One soul, one view. Alright, very important.
The more aware you are of yourself, the more you come to know yourself, the more mindful you are, okay, is the more skilled you become at using this powerful engine, which is your mind.
And then the resolution is like just finishing up the lessons now and just saying yes and reminding people of the theme of your story. So, you know, the theme of this story was the importance of agriculture.
For the motherland, cradle of civilization, for the ancestors and their indomitable spirit, for the elders whom we can learn much, for the youth who represent our promise for tomorrow, for the people, the original people, for the struggle and remembrance of those who struggled on our behalf, for Umoja, the principle of unity that guides us in all we do, for the Creator who created all of the things great and small. We give thanks.
Let's go through the principles. The first one, blessed love and greetings. Welcome to day 5, our last day of camp. That's sad, right? Too short. Just when I started to have fun, it's over. But it's been fun, and we'll do this again next year, most definitely. Looking forward to seeing you all again, and stay connected after camp.
Government is trapping the system.
Jano, I'm so hungry, bro. I haven't eaten all day. Like, my head started to hurt me too. Like, what no could I eat right now?
What about a city samosa? Get your samosa, a fusion of Indian, Jamaican, and African culture. City samosas, the best samosas in the city.
Tell them bow Lidj Tafari, tell them bow Haile Selassie, when me tell them bow Lidj Tafari, tell them bow Haile Selassie, when me tell them bow Lidj Tafari, tell them bow Haile Selassie, when me tell them bow Lidj Tafari, tell them bow Haile Selassie, the 23rd of July, born in a province named Harar. I burn them God from sky, cause I know the prophecy is true. Cause unto us the son was born 1892. He built the OAU, come break all chains. Tell them Tafari was his name, the same man that crowned as the Ras. It didn't come fast. Went from Lidj to Dejazmatch, who governed in Harar from the age of 13. This is you blessed with Iris, supreme first king. You're the throne with the queen. Hear the trumpet sound, gather round, tell the youths them come in. Hail Lidj Tafari, tell them bow. Haile Selassie, let me tell them bow. Lidj Tafari, tell them bow. Haile Selassie, tell them so. Fight so many wars just to centralize the tribes. No 9 to 5 reigns came when the king arrived. Cause out of the womb of Yashima bet he survived, born wise. Plus he focused on his plan, no joke. Armies await his command. They say a child shall lead the way. When them see how the warriors surround, that's when the people them say, this child destined for the throne. When them see how we govern in Harar, that's when they all bow down. The government on his shoulders, Mussolini coming with his plan. He's preparing his soldiers, but his plan has to fail. Weep not, the Lion of Judah prevail. Hail Lidj Tafari, tell him bow. Haile Selassie, when me tell him bow. Lidj Tafari, tell him bow. Haile Selassie, when me tell him bow. Lidj Tafari, tell him bow. Haile Selassie, well, trained in the ancient tongues, plus he carried the blood. Well, front to us a son was born and a child was given.
I want to ask you a question. Have you got your book? Haile Selassie's Ethiopia Volume 1, The Rise of the Priest Warrior King. I've read the book in its entirety, and I must say it's very inspirational, very informative, and very historical, right?
Them call him Lidj Tafari. When he was born, rainfall from sky. Them call him Lidj Tafari. When he was grown in airplanes he fly. They call him Lidj Tafari. The lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Them call him Lidj Tafari. Read your Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Then born near the city of Harar, the inspiration for Bob Marley's guitar. People crowd him like some big superstar. It no matter if England.
Greetings in that divine name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie the First. Glory and honor in the name of his chosen queen, Empress was Zero Menen. My name is Kwasi Bonsu, aka the Dejazmatch Kwasi, aka Ras Kwasi, aka the Reading Ras, aka the Pan-African Happy Man, creative industry attorney. I'm an author, I'm an artist, I'm an actionist, and right now I am the host of Lion Talk Live. Welcome to Lion Talk Live, and welcome to the Lion Voice Network, where the Lions are telling our own story. Heart of celebration to the international and global Rastafari family. Today is July 23rd. This is a day of jubilation across 4 corners of the creation. So I give thanks to greet you. I know most of our family will be at gatherings, at Nyabingis, at dances, at celebration, activations all over the world. So most of you will watch this on the replay. But I felt remiss if the fastest growing Rastafari platform on the planet did not have some special programming for the global family on this auspicious day. We couldn't make that happen. And so I reached out to the network, and tonight we have a special treat. We are sharing space with a prince of the Solomonic line. He won't tell you that. He's too humble. He don't want to talk about bloodlines and nothing like that. But we're going to find out who his lineage is, who is related to. But he's the perfect person. We talk offline for hours about Ethiopia, and through our relationship, I get a greater understanding as to the internal dynamics of Ethiopia. And you cannot see the full divinity of Haile Selassie until you understand the complexity of navigating Ethiopian society, particularly coming out of the feudal era and crafting that into a modern nation state. You cannot truly appreciate the mind of Kadamawi Haile Selassie I without understanding that. So tonight, family, get your ital snacks, get your meditation right. We are going there tonight where everybody knows that we have a tradition here, the Lion Talk Time Machine. So tonight we're gonna stay in the time machine. You know, we like to start in the time machine. The guests tell us where they're from and they bring us to the present. Today we're going to utilize the Lion Talk time machine. We're staying in 1892, family. We're going to really paint the picture tonight. Remember, I wrote a book about this topic, Haile Selassie's Ethiopia, Rise of the Priestly Warrior Kings. So you know I'm in heaven talking about this subject, but it's very important, particularly with where things are globally right now, for us to understand the origin, because I contend that on July 23rd, 1892, the world was forever changed. You know, that miracle of the birth, the only surviving child out of the womb of Yoshimabet, would forever change the world. Millions would hail him as the Almighty. He would set the foundation for Africa's liberation and future path. He would cast down the oppressor with the double-edged sword that came from his mouth at the League of Nations. All of these things are documented, but it starts on this day, 133 years ago, in the mountains of Jerusalem, outside of the province of Harar. So we're going there. But before we do that, let me just take time to big up the greatest online community on the planet. Who am I talking about? The Lion Pride. If you subscribe, you're part of the Lion Pride. We're over 40, what are we? We're over 45,000 now. We're on our way to 46,000. You know, we're doing some numbers now, you know what I mean? So big up everyone who's going forward, watching the new subscribers. You're going forward and watching the old videos. I also want to make mention, we do have exclusive interview with Dr. Akililu Hapte on the channel. He was the final president of Haile Selassie University during the reign of the emperor. He talks about his relationship with the emperor. So you can go forward and look for that episode as well. We are going to be doing a lot more interviews with Ethiopian elders. I just completed an interview with Prince Afsawosen Asarate, who is the great-grandson of Ras Kassa. This is, man, I'm telling you, this was one of the greatest interviews we've ever done. The history is beyond this world. That's going to be available for our Lion Pride on Patreon tonight. Today on His Majesty Earthstrong, we'll release the first clip tomorrow. But man, that episode blew my mind. He knew His Majesty intimately. So we're getting some exclusives. And we're going to be doing a lot more reasonings with Ethiopian elders. I really had the epiphany that just like we're capturing the elders in Rastafari before they transition to the ancestral realm, we need to be doing the same thing with those who interacted with His Majesty as well. So stay tuned. A lot more Ethiopian content coming on the platform. Big up also the Action Lion Pride, those who like, comment, and share. Ubuntu Lion Pride, those who give a one-time contribution over $70. That's going to raise to $100 in August. So when you become a part of the Ubuntu Lion Pride for that one-time contribution, you are forever, memorialized with the channel, and that's going to keep on going up. So one day that might be $10,000 to get that privilege. So do it now and have your name, your family's name, because we're not going to stop. We are going to be, a name to be reckoned with when it comes on to Rastafari media. And if you know what I know, then you know Rastafari is on the cusp of something amazing and miraculous. So get in now while it's early. Big up the Watch and Peep family, all of the ones, them Ras Lidj, Frontline Books. We're going to be doing our episode with Ras Sekou on Saturday. So we'll be announcing our 3 books of the month for Lidj Tafari month. So stay tuned for that. Reading Ras on the Frontline. Big up Frontline Books, our sponsor. Make sure you support Frontline Books. Buy from their catalog. You saw the commercial. Make sure we're circulating the Rastafari and Pan-African dollar. Big up brother Carl Philpotts. He's one of our latest sponsors. Buy his book. All of the people who are making this show possible, please support them, and all of our guests as well. When we bring forward guests, let's spend money with them. Let's support whatever initiatives they have. We're building a community here that's very powerful. So within that, as Babylon is crashing, let's circulate our capital among each other where we can have the most impact. All right, housekeeping out of the way. Let us now get to our guests, family. This brother is a businessman. He is speaking to us today in his capacity as the founder and CEO of Salassie Stand Up, a company that was created with the specific purpose, or entity that was created with the specific purpose to have a statue erected outside of the African Union of His Majesty. They were successful in galvanizing that, and a statue now is outside of the African Union. This is the brother who started the campaign. He didn't do it alone. I supported the brethren in that time, and so many more. The Crown Council of Ethiopia. He's also serves as the PR officer on the Crown Council, but he's not here representing the Crown Council tonight. He's representing Salassie Stand Up. Just like I, he wears many hats. We are happy to welcome my good brethren. I've known this brethren, it's looking like close to 20 years. I don't even know how long I've known this brethren, but let us welcome Nebyat Demessie. Welcome, my family.
Thank you for having me.
Lidj Neb, yes. How is everything?
Everything is going well. Everything is Irie, So happy to be back on the show.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan and supporter of the work that you've been doing in the community, for your support for Salassie Stand Up as well, for the activism, and for helping to educate and liberate minds, which is very important. Can't underestimate the power of that. So thank you for all that you're doing, for inviting me on the show again.
Definitely. And we're not going to go through his history. If you want to see his history, go and watch the episode where he was a featured guest. Today we're going into Ethiopian history. However, I have to put you on the spot, my brother, because I know you don't like to talk about it, but you do have Solomonic bloodline, and for those who that matters, a lot of our Rastafari family, a lot of study around, the descendants from King Solomon. Explain your family background, how you tie into this legacy, this living legacy. I want to make it very clear to the family that this is not a mythology in Ethiopia. This is a living legacy. So talk to us about how do you relate to that Solomonic history in your family?
Sure, yeah. So to provide some background or context, the Solomonic monarchy in Ethiopia really starts with the son of King Solomon and Queen of Sheba, Emperor Menelik I. And so all of Ethiopia's monarchs who descended from that lineage essentially have Solomonic bloodline. In Ethiopia, particularly, there are about 4 main houses, broken up by regions, and all of these descendants have the Solomonic line that come from, the kings or later Rases of these provinces. So my particular line comes from the lineage of King Haile Selassie, who was the great grandfather of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie. He was also the grandfather of Emperor Menelik, because Emperor Menelik is a second cousin to Emperor Haile Selassie, a first cousin to Emperor Haile Selassie, his father. So King Haile Selassie had several children. So I'm a descendant of King Haile Selassie on my mom's side. Interestingly, I knew there was a relation to Empress Taitu. I wasn't quite clear on that. I got some clarity from one of my dad's older brothers, who brought to my attention that our relation to Empress Taitu was through her nephew, whom we're a direct descendant of on my dad's mom's side. And this particular individual, he brought the Tabot, which is a replica of the Ark of the Covenant, which exists throughout Ethiopian Orthodox churches, from the former province called Begemedir, which includes Gondar and Gojam in modern day times, so kind of like northwestish in Ethiopia. And he brought the Tabot over a period of 3 months and established Ntoto Mariam. So there's a church on top of a mountain in Ntoto in Addis Ababa, which was founded by Empress Taitu, and Emperor Menelik. And it's right next to Emperor Menelik's first palace in Addis Ababa. So they shared land next to the Emperor Menelik, and so the connection is on both sides.
Give thanks. And can you explain the 4 branches of the Solomonic dynasty? Can you name those 4 branches?
Yes. So there you have the House of Shoah, which I just referenced right now, where Nugus Haile Selassie, or King Haile Selassie, was the king of Shoah. His son, King Haile Melekot, the father of Emperor Menelik, following in his footsteps, was also the king of Shoah. This all predated Emperor Haile Selassie's ascension to power. You also have the Gondar Lasta branch, which kind of includes, like Gondar and Wondo. There's a mix, and you kind of had like the southern Wondo portion as well. Although they also have a claim to a descendancy from the Prophet Muhammad. You have the House of Tigray. When we talk about the Aksumite Empire, you have the city of Aksum, which is in Tigray, but then you have the Aksumite Empire, in which all Solomon monarchs were represented before expansion happened southward, or there was a name change essentially. So it could be understood as the Palatnum, or the name of the nation state was the Aksum Empire at that time. And then you have the House of Gojam as well. From my understanding, I don't think historically there were kings that came out of Gojam, but from a historical standpoint, ancient history. But there was an appointment of a Solomonic king within the House of Gojam.
Okay.
Lasta, Shoah, and Tigray, and these constitute the four main houses.
And this is very important, family, because we're stepping into the Lion Talk time machine. We are setting the dial to 1892 now, and we are going to the birth of His Majesty, and we want to kind of track what was happening in these 4 houses. We want to track what was happening internationally. This whole episode tonight, we want to just, talk about some of the internal moving and happenings in Ethiopia, and I think it's going to be very enlightening and very important. So we have Shoah, we have Lasta, Wollo, we have Tigray, and we have Gojam. These are the 4 branches, and within these branches you would have many princes and princesses. So it's not one individual per region. You would have branches of branches. As the theoretically you had thousands of people who would have been carrying this bloodline through marriage. Not all marriages were church marriages, so you had children that came before. So this is a complex tapestry of history. I want to start with the House of Tigray, because in 1892, Tigray had just lost the power of the realm. Famous emperor who started as Casamercha, captive of Emperor Tewodros, along with Menelik. They knew each other from their time as young princes. And he ascended to be a legendary figure in Ethiopia, Emperor Johannes IV, who not once but twice defeated the Ottoman Turks from Egypt, who tried to conquer Ethiopia during his realm, who repelled the Mahdi invasion from Sudan, Islamic hordes that were coming in to subdue Ethiopia. He's seen as a heroic figure in the annals, but also controversial because of his forced conversions to Christianity. Talk to us about the House of Tigray and some of the internal machinations that were taking place around 1892 in Tigray.
Sure. Yes. So the House of Tigray is best known for Emperor Johannes, through Emperor Johannes, who who obviously came up through the ranks and was emperor of all of Ethiopia, but hailing from the House of Tigray. Interestingly, he ruled out of Tabor for many years, which is in Gondar.
Okay.
Although he had a palace in Mickle as well, in the Tigray region. And so at the time Emperor Johannes was an emperor of Ethiopia, Menelik II was the king of Shoa, following in his ancestors' footsteps. So after he was released from the fortress in Magdala under Emperor Tewodros, where all the princes were kind of held captive, which was he was able to ascend to the throne of King Selassie, King Haile being his father, and then ruled over Shoa. So the politics, there was rivalry, right? I mean, I think the Game of Thrones, really Ethiopia has a lot more history.
Yes.
Ancient civilization, thousands more years of history of these type of engagements.
Yes.
And game theory can be seen within Ethiopia as opposed to other places. So Emperor Johannes had levied heavy taxes, particularly against Emperor Menelik, because he saw him as a legitimate claimant to the throne. And so part of the strategy was to, prevent Emperor Menelik's expansion or emergence to being emperor. Emperor Menelik's uncle, Ras who was son of King Selassie, had the favor of Emperor Tewodros. He was also held captive in Emperor Tewodros' court as well. Was a strategic advisor. So I think, if you kind of qualify the Shoan approach, it's one of wisdom. There's a saying in Amharic that the Shoans will chew what they eat for a year before swallowing it. So there's this constant, kind of, you can call it scheming or strategizing. That's why people like Ras who himself could have been acclaimed to the Solomonic throne through his father, King Selassie, is also looked at as a kingmaker himself, despite having the Solomonic blood that would enable him to be a king. So the Shoans are known as strategists. Emperor Selassie also has that Solomonic line from the King Selassie branch of Shoa. So and you can see how that also helped him to become a stellar diplomat. Not that it's specific to Shoa itself, other Ethiopian empires, but I think it's perhaps more pronounced there. So Emperor Menelik was able to, or as he was king of Shoa, he was expanding southward, whereas Emperor Johannes' focus, as you mentioned earlier, was against the Ottomans, who had seized the ports in Misawa, in the Assad region, in the northernmost part of Ethiopia, which has an outlet to the sea, to the Red Sea. So there was an interest of Islamic expansionism from the Ottoman Empire through the Egyptians as well. They were under the Ottoman Pasha as well. And so Emperor Johannes was pretty much focused in the northernmost region, and then with the invasion of the Addis in Sudan in the northwest, he was also sent on missions vis-a-vis the British to almost as a crusader or as a priestly king in a sense, trying to revert the empire back to its Christian origins due to the Islamic invasions that happened, some 150 plus years back, where Ethiopian Christians were mandated to change their religion from one of Orthodox Christianity to Islam.
Yeah.
So those were the dynamics. King Menelik knew at the time that Emperor Johannes was busy and that there was this rivalry. So he essentially fortified the empire by using his position as king of Showa to bring other entities south of Showa into the fold. So expanding his empire and then garnering the support and loyalty of other provincial kings and warlords as well, who later became Rases, some even kings, as you can see in the case of King Khan in Wallo. So
yes.
That's kind of the dynamics in a nutshell. Obviously, you had King Taklayamanut in Gojam,
Yes.
also saw Emperor Menelik as a potential threat, also in certain cases as an ally against Emperor Johannes. And so there is this pivoting and changing of strategy as the various houses of Solomon vie for power.
And let us explain to our audience that in this time, the kingdoms of Ethiopia are essentially autonomous kingdoms. So each of these races and kings have their own private armies that own no allegiance. So even though they're part of the Ethiopian realm, the soldiers of Emperor Menelik would have no allegiance to Emperor Johannes unless they get an order from Menelik second. Likewise, the soldiers of Gojam, so consensus had to be built to mobilize against an external threat. From my research, there was some level of resentment from Tigray that Showa wasn't more active in the battles against the Ottomans. I want you to also talk about the Turk Basha, aka Ras Alula, who was the power behind the throne essentially for Emperor Johannes. And this is important because we're setting the stage. If you love Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, you love all these epic fiction, they have nothing on the machinations of Ethiopian history and the battles for the thrones that were taking place Ethiopia. And just like you have the one who sits on the throne, but then you have who is the power, who is out in the battlefield enforcing that power. Talk to us about Ras Alula.
Sure, yeah, Ras Alula. So he hailed from the Tanbain area in Tigray. He was instrumental during Emperor Johannes' time against the Italians during their invasion. The Italians had settled in Ethiopia, I believe, in 1887, prior to Emperor Menelik's rise to power. And there was a purchase agreement made between an Italian company. Obviously, colonialists will kind of use two initial approaches before a military expedition. One is, missionaries. So they'll send priests who serve as instruments of government to, convert the population as a tactic of making them loyal to, their colonial masters, so to speak, right, from their perspective. The other approach, was through the guise of businesses where land purchase agreements were made. And so there was a land purchase agreement made between a sultanate and the Afar region, which, is kind of split now between Eritrea and Ethiopia. So you have people from the region of Afar who live in Ethiopia, and you also have people from Afar who live in Eritrea. Nonetheless, at that time, there was a land purchase agreement made, but then it was when it became clear that the Italians wanted to attack Ethiopia and invade Ethiopia and colonize it. Ras Alula was one of the patriots who launched a counteroffensive, defeating the Italians at Dogali, and he was chanting, saying that he would throw these encroaching Italians into the Red Sea. Interestingly, Emperor Johannes, perhaps due to British intervention or British requests to resolve the conflict in Sudan, because Egypt was a colony of Great Britain at the time.
Yes.
So was Sudan, but then you had a Muslim Islamic rebellion within Sudan, where the Mahdists were essentially rejecting, in a similar manner, you can say the Ethiopians were rejecting colonialism, although these two entities fought against each other, meaning the Mahdists versus the Ethiopians under Emperor Johannes. It really was because the British put Emperor Johannes to the task to fight against the Mahdists. So Emperor Johannes was fighting on behalf of the British as a proxy war. Due to this issue in Sudan, which allowed the Italians to settle in Ethiopia, and that's how they were there before Emperor Menelik emerged as an emperor of Ethiopia, who was later forced out through the Battle of Adwa to push them out of Ethiopia in 1896.
That's an excellent point, because right as the Berlin Conference was taking place, or right before the Berlin Conference, Emperor Johannes had launched the expedition into Sudan to free some British soldiers from that were garrisoned in Sudan, and there was a treaty signed. The British never fulfilled their obligations under the treaty. So, however, that was being done because Emperor Johannes was also looking for allies to try to back off the Italians, who had also established. So you have to put it in the context of, having a lot of bad options, because the Europeans had their own plan, but they had access to all these modern armaments. You know what I mean? It's like when in the science fiction movie, they come with the new weapons and the new super weapons. It was like that. The Europeans were coming with, rapid fire, machine guns, the howitzer, these kind of weapons that, for an African monarch were invaluable, because, you could mow down thousands, and whoever had these weapons had that edge. So, it's easy for us to judge and say, why are they talking to the Europeans and why didn't they just do this? But the Ethiopians, I think, were very shrewd in realizing that, we can talk about Emperor Tewodros, and I'm sure that we will, his quest to build a super cannon,
Right.
and bring, because they understood the technology race that they were in terms of preserving the independence and seeing these Europeans turning up on their shores, these Egyptians, these Turks turning up on their shores with these weapons, So speak to us about, the calculation that, or let me ask you, do you think that was part of Emperor Johannes's calculation in getting in bed with the British, for lack of a better word, against the Mahdists?
Right. No, that's a good question. Well, I think Emperor Johannes was in part indebted to the British, because essentially he was the one who led them to invade Emperor Tewodros.
Yes.
As you mentioned earlier,
Yes.
had held British captives, as a result of them refusing not to help in building a super cannon that he could then use against his enemies, which included the Ottomans or the Turks at the time. So, Emperor Tewodros assumed that, based on the relationship he had with England and Queen Victoria, that they would respond to his requests as an ally. That wasn't the case, and as a result, he held some British dignitaries captive, making those demands. The British then sent troops. Most of them came from India and
Yes.
other colonial holdings of the British, and Emperor Johannes was the one who helped them, who helped lead them to the fortress at Makdala, at the hilltop where Emperor Tewodros was. And that's how Emperor Tewodros essentially, at that point, once Emperor Tewodros realized that he had lost the war and some of his powerful right-hand men like Ras Alula, who fought valiantly against the British, he turned the gun around himself, and in refusal to give up his country to to a foreign entity, he turned the gun on himself and shot himself, committing suicide. And that's how Emperor Johannes emerged as Emperor of Ethiopia. So he was indebted to the British, and I think upon that request, he felt that it would be in the best interest of his, from a political standpoint, to respond or acquiesce to their demands, which he did. And I think he ended up paying a significant price for that, as he was eventually killed by the very same Mahdist who he attacked per order of the British.
Do you think that the Mahdist would have attacked Ethiopia without Johannes taking up that cause on behalf of the British? This is a very crucial point I didn't really consider deeply, but now you're really elucidating something that
right. That's a difficult question, right? I mean, when you start getting to speculation, it becomes difficult. What may or may not happen. I mean, there have been Islamic-backed, or Ottoman Empire-backed attacks, but at the same time, it depends how you really interface, right? So if you kind of compare and contrast that with like the leadership of Emperor Selassie, where he was creating alliances with other African leaders, you could then retroactively question, could that have not been done under the leadership of Emperor Johannes, right? Where you already had Mahdists who were in opposition of colonial rule. I don't necessarily blame Emperor Johannes for defending Ethiopia, right? But he did make a choice, and I believe he did see Italians as lesser of a threat because of his own religious inclination and beliefs, which resulted in the Italians settling in Ethiopia and posing a challenge to Emperor Menelik's rule. Could we have defeated both? Perhaps. I mean, it appeared that Ras Alula was confident in his warrior skills and leadership ability to defeat them. And as a result of the measures he took to defeat Italians, where he killed, I think, over 20,000 or some in some battles, he was demoted by Emperor Johannes as a result of that. So I can't really speak for Emperor Johannes. I don't know what the political calculations were at the time. Hindsight is 2020.
Yes.
So the Ethiopian emperors, including even Mengistu Haile Mariam, was providing support, if not to the, I guess to North Sudan. I mean, at least we ended up aiding the Sudanese, right, and in their own struggle for liberation, right?
Okay.
By Haile Selassie, by Mengistu, and I think we still maintain decent relations with them as well. So it's kind of reversed in the case of Sudan, but there's a possibility, right? I mean, if it's fascinating. If not the Mahdists, they could have propped up another Muslim leader, or clan within that region, and then use them to fight their proxy war against Ethiopia as well. So.
Yes, very, very interesting. This is high level reasoning, family. We go there on this platform, and it's very fascinating because one of the legendary moments of Ethiopian history is Emperor Johannes dying on the battlefield, fighting for his nation, his country, becoming a martyr, in a sense. And he paid a heavy price. His head is cut off of his body, taken to Sudan and paraded through the streets, so he paid a heavy price for the sacrifice. And it is said that he appoints Ras Mengesha. There was question in terms of his parentage and his lineage, but we do know that, in that battle it's said that Ras Mengesha is called, and that the intention of Emperor Johannes is that the crown would pass to Ras Mengesha, who is his son. How do you see the paternity of Ras Mengesha? Is it in question in Ethiopia?
Yeah,
or
my understanding is that he was a nephew, but then he was recognized because Emperor Johannes's biological son was still alive, but he passed the throne over to Ras Mengesha, Johannes, who was understood to be his child as well. So I've heard conflicting or contradicting narratives around that. I
Yes.
think for the purposes of the Solomonic monarchy, I think it makes sense to consider him a direct descendant, biological son of, or at least a son of Emperor Johannes.
Okay. And I want to big up my sister, Wayne, who comes from that lineage.
Yes.
You know Wayne.
Of course.
She went to my high school, although I didn't know her back then, but big up. But yeah, so, and this is why it's so important, because we read these things in the history books, but they have descendants that are walking around doing great things and other things. So it's good to see that continuation and know that this is a living history. We have Ras Mangasha, who has the weight of a great legacy now cast upon him, and also one of the greatest generals in Ethiopian history at his disposal in the great Ras Alula. I have a chapter in my book that opens with Menelik marching the Shawan forces to Tigray border and deciding to turn back in 1892 because of the devastation of the Kefu Khan and the great drought that was, Menelik making the calculation that they didn't have supplies, the supply lines were precarious, but he was concerned about Ras Mangasha and Ras Alula fomenting rebellion, gathering the princes. What were, to the best of your knowledge, what was Ras Mangasha and Ras Alula's activities in those early days after the death of Emperor Johannes? Because Emperor Johannes never gets to pass the crown because Menelik is so powerful, he crowns himself. So what, talk to us about Ras Mangasha and Ras Alula in those fateful days.
Right. Well, obviously, there was that rivalry, and pursuant to Emperor Johannes's rule, it was Emperor Menelik who, from their perspective, stole the show. So there was a rivalry between the House of Tigray and the House of Showa during that particular time, in terms of who should ascend to the throne. Obviously, Emperor Menelik won that battle. I think there was some resentment also by Ras Mangasha that he wasn't appointed to a kingship status from Emperor Menelik as well. And so, the notion that the Solomonic throne is the throne of my fathers definitely was extended in the mind of Ras Mangasha at the time, who didn't want to succumb to the orders of Emperor Menelik. So there was that rivalry, and he also commanded an army, as you mentioned earlier. All of the Solomonic monarchs, and even the Rases and the Dejazmatches, they had their own soldiers. So it's it put Ethiopia in this sort of perpetual state of conflict around. I wouldn't say perpetual state. There was that, like during the Zaman Masafin, the era of the princes, where you had these semi-autonomous regions, but it posed a threat, and it posed significant uncertainty in terms of who would emerge to power, right? And so it's almost like the best fighter would win. Of course, in those instances where there wasn't a clear line of succession from the death of an emperor to say his biological child, or even the cases where that was, where other houses or members from different houses felt that they were more entitled, they always posed a threat to the political stability because of their own legitimate claims.
Okay. So I just want everyone to be clear that when Lidj Tafari is born, there's still a little bit of shakiness in the realm. There's a lot of tension in the realm. This is pre-Battle of Adwa, so we're just dealing with internal Ethiopian tension. We're not even dealing with the external threat, even though Menelik was well aware by 1892 that the Italians had their eyes on Ethiopia. There was a major loan that Italy had given to Ethiopia, that Menelik worked assiduously to make sure he paid off during the Kefukan, in the midst of the drought, working the people so that they could pay off this loan and not be, give Italy a pretext to try to annex Ethiopia. So they're well aware. Of course, Ras McCunnan has already traveled to Europe by this time. So they're aware of the European Industrial Revolution and how vulnerable Ethiopia was, which many of the Rases at the time probably had no clue, how advanced the development. They would be getting snippets from traders and things like that because Ethiopians, of course, are naturally curious. But seeing is another thing, hearing gossip from a trader and going to London, as Ras McCunnan did, or going to Italy and looking around the streets and seeing all of the development, and you can imagine the mindset of Ras McCunnan in this time. So Ras Mengesha, Ras Alula, that's one branch of the Solomon. Let's go to Lasta Wollo. What was happening? Who were the players in that branch, and what was happening around that 1892 period?
Right. Well, you also had Empress Taitu, Ras Kuksawale, and these people were resisting, all vying, right, for their own interests to secure their own place, their own position within the Solomonic throne and ranking. So a lot of what was deployed by the emperors as a strategy to mediate or to garner support was marriage, right? So marrying within these families, so you see intermarriage between the House of Tigray and the House of Shawa. You see intermarriage between Ras Kuksawale and Empress Zoditu, right? And so there is a lot of that in order to, right, because essentially you squash any beef if, at least for the next generation, is born into both families. So I think that really was a strategy. I would qualify it similarly to what was happening, in Tigray, perhaps to a lesser degree. I think one of the strategies that Empress Taitu deployed was, again, trying to, insert her own relatives within the aristocracy by bringing them from, Begamadera into Addis. Even trying to marry off Ras McCunnan after Emperor Selassie's mom passed away. One of her own relatives. So that, once they understood that, the Shoans kind of are now at the helm, you can react, you can choose, okay, should I galvanize my men and confront them at the battlefield, and may the best man win in terms of who wins the crown, or do you integrate and through marriage, find your way to integrate yourself with the larger Solomonic dynasty and power structure. So,
and I think it was Emperor Johannes that was pushing for Taitu and Menelik to get together, because he wanted him tied to someone, from the northern region, because Shawa was always considered a threat, from Haile Selassie time, when it really emerged as one of the major powers in Ethiopia.
Right, you bring up a very good point. In fact, sometimes even within, if you look at the palaces in Gondar, for example, you would have the females sometimes would be separated from their own husbands, right? So an emperor and empress, because if the empress invites some of her friends, you don't necessarily know who she may be spying on. And in fact, Empress Taitu had filled the Shoan courts with Gondare people that it made the Shoans somewhat nervous, and so you see some of that resistance because many thought that she was essentially spying, right? Because you have to know what's going on in order to strategize, but how do you fault someone for being a spy if they're married into that family? It becomes a very difficult balance. You can see it also with the marriage between Emperor Selassie and Empress Menen. Empress Menen being a descendant of the king of Wondo, who posed a threat to Emperor Menelik. But you see, Emperor Menelik's strategy was he would defeat you, but then ensure that you're integrated within the polity, within the body politic. He wouldn't treat you like an enemy. So he defeats you with force if you resist, but then treats you with kindness after that. And it was a forgiving emperor. So you see that in the case of King Mickle, who was a Muslim prior to that, and also
Yes.
what they like a bandit essentially in Amharic they call, he was a shiftan initially, but a powerful one that found his way through both warfare tactics and diplomacy to rise up to the ranking of king after accepting Christianity.
Yes, very key, and he would of course play a major role in the legend that would emerge surrounding a young Rastafari being the father of Lidj and invading the famous invasion of Addis Ababa that was stopped during Rastafari reign, which ended in his being crowned as Ras, an heir to the throne. But we're in 1892. We're not dialing the time machine there today, family. We'll talk about that another time. We're in 1892 and before. So you had Empress Taitu, who also, according to my research, that the name Addis Ababa is given in 1892. Yes. So the new flower, because for Rastafari, when we look at how we interpret the prophetic part of this, is that, when it talks about the new Jerusalem, the new heaven, and the new earth, and then we see the name, the new flower of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, we draw that correlation, and it's, I don't think coincidence that Addis Ababa is founded in the same year that Lidj Tafari is born, because again, for us, Lidj Tafari symbolizes a new beginning for humanity, a new emergence. Of course, the Kefu can talk to us about the drought that took place, and did you ever hear from your family any oral histories, or are Ethiopians aware, just how bad was that drought from 1888 to 1892?
Right. It was very bad. And in fact, I think it even extended through the Battle of Adwa as well. That coupled with Kufukan, also the Rinderpest, where there was a cattle disease, and in fact, some people, and part of the reason that I mentioned the history of Italians settling in Eritrea before the reign of Emperor Menelik as emperor was because Emperor Menelik is sometimes faulted for not marching all the way to Eritrea to oust the Italians who had seized Eritrea, including the ports. But he wasn't in a position after marching and galvanizing his troops from Addis Ababa, some on horse, some on mule, some walking barefoot. That coupled with a drought and famine, and a cattle disease that killed a lot of the oxen and cattle, which they depended on for sustenance. Emperor Menelik really wasn't in a position to march forward, and so Kufukan is also what took the life of Ras Makonnen, which also, in a sense, paved the way for Emperor Selassie to emerge as a leader. He had assumed authority under Ras Makonnen's guidance as a governor. Obviously, at that time, when at the age of 13, they have what they call like a mogzit in Ethiopia, which is almost like a caretaker who will oversee. So he was able to gain experience in governance. When his father passed away, he ended up moving to Addis Ababa and was then raised under the supervision of Emperor Menelik, who sent him to Sidamo at the time as a governor, and then later back to Harar, where his father, Ras Makonnen, ruled as a governor. And he also allowed Emperor Selassie, when he was a governor of Sidamo, to take the 30,000 troops that Ras Makonnen also took into battle. His loyal troops were then given to Emperor Selassie, although he was governing a different town. So that also helped position the emperor to rise to power. Although some of the other members of the Solomonic line had a lot more in terms of bandwidth and military personnel, like Ras Kasa, the emperor's cousin, like Ras Mangesha. This is now moving to the 1930s, but even prior to that, if you looked at the even the staying within 1892, a lot of these other Rases and princes had a significant amount of military personnel at the time. But the Kufukan really devastated the country, and the internal strife, as well as foreign invasions, exacerbated the situation.
So, if I was to take a young, child from Ethiopia today and ask about the Kefukan, do they have any awareness? Is it taught in schools?
Probably not. I mean, one of the things that the Tigray People's Liberation Front did when they came into power, and I would also fault the Derg as well when they came into power, and indoctrinated the people with leftist, Marxist-Leninist ideology. One of the things that they wanted to do was prevent the people from knowing their true origins and true roots. The TPLF then actually fired about 40 professors from Addis Ababa University, which was formerly known as Haile Selassie, the first university. That itself, the name change itself, is indicative of how they wanted to detach the Ethiopian people from their monarchical roots, to have no mention of the emperors who did so much and sacrificed so much for Ethiopia. So, I think as a result of that, and Western indoctrination after the 17 years of socialism has really created a rift between Ethiopians from their own history and origin. So I don't think they would know much about it unless they're scholars of history or students of history.
Wow, and this is so important because again, this drought also shows that there was a history of drought. The drought that they used to scandalize His Majesty in 1974 was not unusual in terms of the history of Ethiopia. And when you know that history and can put things into context, because they almost make it seem like His Majesty caused the drought and purposely ignored it. And this is something that I think why history is so important. But yes, the Kefukan, every Rastafari, every pan-Africanist should know that Ethiopia survived. This was like an apocalyptic tale. 90% of the cattle perished, 1/3 of the population, mass migrations of people searching for food. It said that the hyenas were fat. They couldn't even move. Some of them, people were eating hyenas because the hyenas couldn't pull themselves away. They were so satiated with all of the corpses that lined the horizon. There were also locusts, caterpillars. There were so many ancillary catastrophes that were compounded upon Ethiopia in that short span of time, preceding the birth of Lidj Tafari. And actually, one of the reasons why Ras Makonnen decided to go to a Jerusalem Godo was to escape, the stifling, walls, city of Harar, the disease that was ravaging the city, and go up into the fresh mountain air. Of course, Waziri Yeshimabed had many miscarriages prior to conceiving Lidj Tafari. And the stage is set again. Epic story. I want to see it. I would say if I was a regular person, an HBO series about the Ethiopian royal court. When you're talking about Empress Taitu packing the court with people from Gondar, can you imagine that as a series? But I can't say HBO because I'm not a regular person. I want to see it on the Lion Voice Network, family. We gotta do that ourselves. We can't give that to HBO But I just want everyone to see the levels of intrigue and the balancing act, that was taking place. We just look at the Solomonic bloodline as a monolith, but now, as we can see as we go deeper into the history, you know what I mean, it was not that simple. There was a great battle that took place. I'm going to go back in time a little bit, between Gojam and Showa, and Emperor Johannes had to intercede. And this is the other part of the Solomonic branch, in Gojam. And Gojam, when you study the history, is very key, because right up until his Majestic time, Gojam was always a trouble spot. There was some rebellion, there was some things, and the roots of these conflicts, if you don't know the history, it's perplexing. But explain the battle, and I call it the battle, of the Dejazmatches and the Rasses, because at that time there was conflict. But explain that battle and who was ruling in Gojam.
Yeah, King Taklamonot was in power during that time, and Emperor Menelik of Showa. So it was both Gojam and Wollo actually that Menelik was able to seize.
Yes.
But and in doing so, Emperor Johannes realized that Emperor Menelik or King Menelik at the time, was expanding his territory. And the benefit of seizing these territories is that they have the Amharic word is gibber for taxation. So once you show that you have dominion or rule over a certain province, the people within that province have to then, you can levy taxes against them, which which allows you to be richer and more dominant, and to further grow and solidify your empire. So they were in constant, this was sort of the MO of a lot of the provincial kings at the time. So Emperor Johannes intervened and mandated that he retreat, that Emperor Menelik retreat and give back the land. And I think he was able to win some favors from Emperor Johannes, the King and King Taklamat, and vice versa as a result of that. And so he had to concede territory, but then Emperor Menelik went south while Emperor Johannes was busy at the battlefield, and was able to really get the south and these other the kings of Walaita. I mean, it didn't necessarily happen without a fight, but he was able to garner their support as well. And in doing so, respond to the taxes that Emperor Johannes kept on levying on the House of Showa. Part of the reason of King Menelik's expansion was to actually be able to pay the tribute he had to Emperor Johannes. So it wasn't just that he was vying for power. He wasn't that he was this megalomaniac that wanted to just rule over the entire of Ethiopia. It was because he had to respond to the government, the federal government's mandate, and as a result, it empowered him and it made him more suitable to ascend to the throne than other rivals at the time.
He was a master strategist, Menelik. So while Emperor Johannes ruled the north, he took the opportunity to expand southern. And of course, not without controversy. This is one of the main points of contention in modern Ethiopia today, because there was many bloody battles that took place during this time. Ras Alula was part of some of that expansion. Menelik's Minister of War, what was his name?
Fitari Hapte Georgis.
Yes, Hapte Georgis. Yes. So this is and you have to understand this to understand some of the grievances that you hear, or things that are used in propaganda today. But as my brother here, we speak offline, and he says, each empire dished it as well as they gave it. You know what I mean? So there were times where Oromo expansion was happening, and the Amhara were on the receiving end. There were times when the Amhara were expanding and the Oromo were on the receiving end. So it's not just a black and white situation that was taking place. However, it was still very volatile in the sense that many people, because King Teklehai Malakat of Gojam, he also declared himself King of Kings. We have to also remember that. So just to show that it wasn't that Emperor Johannes was just seen as the unquestioned ruler. Both Menelik and King Teklehai Malakat wanted to ascend the throne as King of Kings. However, because Emperor Johannes had assisted the British, he had the modern weapons. He had Ras Alula, the Turk Basha, who had an uncanny ability for war and war strategy. So this is something very crucial to understand. So we talked about Shawa, we talked about Tigray, we talked about Gojam, and we talked about Lasta. In terms of overall 1892, what do you think? Let's talk about the external threats now. What was happening in terms of the relationship with Italy, the colonial powers around this time?
Right. Well, the colonial powers, right, in 1884, right, was the Berlin Conference, but it was, it took time for them to mobilize and figure out, which European countries wanted their own special carvings within Africa. And so, what you saw in Africa was political turmoil. I think in as much as, it brought devastation, conflict, crisis, contestation in Africa, at least in the case of Ethiopia, I think the foreign invasion, also helped to bring the otherwise, vying warlords together under one central command. And you see that under the leadership of Emperor Menelik, who was able to really speak to the ethos of Ethiopianism, and the commitment to Ethiopia's independence, territorial sovereignty, integrity, faith and commitment in religion and God, right, and the crown, in order to ensure that everyone fought for the interests of Ethiopia at that particular time. And this threat is what also helped in garnering the support from Ras Mangasha as well. Initially, he was looking to align with the Italians, similar to how perhaps Emperor Johannes had some strategic alignment with the British, right, because Emperor Menelik was still, or King Menelik was still a rival at the time. And so with the presence of the Italians, it wasn't necessarily an act of betrayal or treason, right, because this racial dichotomy as well didn't really exist in Ethiopia at the time. So they realized, okay, there are external powers, and we need to forge relationships with them to fortify our own strength and struggle in terms of being able to advance. And so once Ras Mangasha understood that the Italians would, that Menelik's fate would also descend upon him, he switched sides and at the end of the day fought quite valiantly actually, in support of Ethiopian independence and unity. So it created an interesting dynamic in terms of bringing the people together. And the second invasion is actually what perhaps emboldened even Emperor Haile Selassie to go down a path of consolidation and centralization of power, because he realized that having provincial warlords would, or Rases or kings even would be detrimental to preserving or building a strong nation state. And so you can see some of the measures the reforms the emperor took in terms of centralizing power, building one imperial army, right, that would be loyal to the state, loyal to the king of kings, perhaps without understanding the implications in terms of rendering some of the provincial kings soldierless, and with some may look at it and say, well, that's what brought down the monarchy, right? Because once you reduce the number of potential rivals to the Solomonic throne, and there's only one Solomonic monarch at the head, that becomes the target, and now the other descendants of the line are deprived of the soldiers that they would have otherwise used to fight for reclamation or restoration.
Yes, yes. Very key point and key perspective. And I want to just thank you for the perspective that you're giving us. I don't want this channel to be an echo chamber of just Rastafari we love, but someone like yourself, where this is your living history. You would have heard this history from your grandparents, your uncles, your parents. And it's important for us as we examine Ethiopian history to know that this is a people's culture, because it's become fashionable, and especially because a lot of Black people in the West have started to reject Christianity, to think that this is just a white people's religion imposed on Africans. And I always point people to Ethiopia,
yes,
where independently, and one of the reasons why Ethiopia was not able to be colonized, by any other branch of Christianity, and they tried, Catholicism, even the Protestants, is because they had their own concept, of Christianity that was very unique and very much different than what was being practiced in the West, and having someone like yourself that can speak to the history so clearly makes it a little bit more real than me here trying to convince people. You speaking about the history, I think, is just a testament to the vitality of this history, and that this is real African history that needs to be studied by all. Now, let me ask you this question. Lidj Tafari, how important is he in world history in your estimation? I know you're biased because you're a relative, but how do you look at Lidj Tafari, the impact of the birth of this baby boy?
Right. No, I actually look at Emperor Selassie's role, really, I mean, as an objective, from an objective lens, and I would believe, or hope to believe, that I'm not biased in my perspective, but I think his contributions speak volumes in terms of what His Majesty was able to do on the global stage. I think he was a stellar diplomat, a consummate diplomat, the world's greatest. And I mean that when I say that. It's not just to state that. I mean, in terms of what he was able to do on the international stage, in terms of advocating for peace, collective security, unity. He was able to not only speak prophecy, but also implement the morals and virtues that our emperors that hail from the Solomonic line represent, into practice, into action. Even when it comes to pan-Africanism, right? There was a lot of talk, right? It was a vision, it was an ideal, but seldom are there leaders who are able to implement the vision in which they articulate. A lot of times they articulate it as a campaign strategy to garner the support of the people, and don't follow through on that. But the emperor was an emperor that held the rest of the world accountable, and by virtue of standing on a much higher moral ground and principle, he was able to showcase the hypocrisy and bias that existed. Right, Ethiopia was a member of the League of Nations. So we talk about African participation and access to these international diplomatic circles. The emperor was able to achieve that, and once he became a member of that, he was realizing that Ethiopia was and other African countries weren't being treated fairly, in accordance to the rules and regulations that the very same countries who were guilty of this unfair treatment made up. And you can see that in the case of the League of Nations when he appealed. There was an arms embargo that prevented Ethiopia from accessing arms, and they said it was implemented on both countries, but the Italians were able to access arms. The Italians were able to, and the French themselves had a secret pact with the Italians to allow the arms that were already procured by Italy to come across the railway from Djibouti. And I want to bring up my grandfather as well, because he was a patriot and he blew up trains that were full of Italian soldiers that were coming from Djibouti. When he got to the Mojo and Adama area, he blew them up and with his other patriots because they essentially were bussing in Italian soldiers, because you had Italian Somaliland to the east, and really was and the emperor wasn't even asking for military assistance from other countries. They fronted the money for ammunition and they were denied that. So the rest of the world was complicit in a genocide against Ethiopia. Mustard gas was used. Ethiopians were deprived of weapons that they themselves were capable of paying and wanted to pay. And the Italians dropped mustard gas on not just the patriots and soldiers that were fighting, but on innocent civilians.
Yes.
They put it in the water streams as well. And so, but the emperor, upon defeating them, following in the footsteps of Emperor Menelik, didn't preach hate. He allowed the Italians to live in Ethiopia. When he was asked on an international stage about, the future of white people in South Africa, right? Because the emperor was at that time secretly supporting liberation efforts in South Africa. He said, well, we should, this notion of black and white should be erased from the psyche of mankind. We all come from one human race and we should treat others equally. Differences in skin tone and color are no different from the differences in the color of people's eyes. And in order to, of course, there were past injustices which should be accounted for, but we should also try to look above that and see some positive byproducts that may have emerged from colonialism. Consider that, as value add, and move forward in peace and harmony. And that's essentially what Nelson Mandela did when he was released from prison. And he also referred to Emperor Haile Selassie and Ethiopianism as the guiding light of the ANC and his own fight for freedom. So I think the emperor, when he came to America, he made it a point to seek out Native Americans, and was actually appointed as, I think it was a Blue Eagle, which is a prestigious title amongst Native Americans. He made sure to visit the tomb of Martin Luther King Jr., and he also hosted Pan-Africanists, in Ethiopia, including Malcolm X and Maya Angelou, prominent African Americans who were also part of the civil rights movement, advocating for freedom and equality here. So he was a beacon of hope, inspiration, a fighter for freedom, justice, and he just didn't speak about it, he showed it through action. Shashamane is a living example of that. We know of prominent Pan-Africanists who unfortunately were not able to step a foot in Africa, but you have the emperor, who was in London, after appealing to the League of Nations, still in direct contact with patriots in Ethiopia, who created the Ethiopian World Federation to advocate for, right? And this is an entity that was able to garner the support of Black Americans in this country who are willing to fight for the freedom and liberation of Ethiopia. And so you have Tuskegee Airmen who went and fought against the Italians. Unprecedented. This wasn't through some Security Council of the United Nations. This was one emperor, betrayed by the rest of the world, who kept fighting. And so you see the emperor's perseverance from the time he was a child. it wasn't childish, childish ambition, but he was ambitious, but he also persevered, and that's what actually, and that's why the Crown Council, promoted him as opposed to the Jiyasu, because they saw in him a better leader, a more effective leader, who was willing to go through the growing pains to build a nation that the emperor was able to build.
Very powerful, very powerful. And for those who are not familiar, you started a company called Salassie Stand Up. Talk to us about some of the work that you have done. I think today is an appropriate day to remind people about the work that you have done, and then give us a picture, because you've shared with me off camera that the work is not done. There's still work to be done. And I want to, offer this platform to Salassie Stand Up for all of your efforts to reach the Rastafari community. We are one of the fastest growing Rastafari platforms on the planet, so we definitely want to be of service. But talk to us about what is Salassie Stand Up, what have you achieved, and what does the future look like?
No, thank you for the opportunity, definitely. And also thank you again for your support of the movement. I know with IDOR, you had extended an invitation for me to introduce Salassie Stand Up at the time, many, many years ago, over a decade ago. So, I structured Salassie Stand Up, actually to provide, more context. Initially, it wasn't my intent to launch a movement that I was going to lead to advocate for the building of a statue of His Majesty. I first took the idea to Ethiopia and pitched the idea to the Veterans Association. My grandfather played an instrumental role in leadership there. He was able to single-handedly build the chapter in the Wollo province that he happened to live in after retirement for many years. And I was thinking that, the administration in Addis Ababa that head up the Veterans Association would take the initiative and run with it with my backing and support. Unfortunately, due to the interference and fear of government repression, they weren't able to provide any support. I then witnessed elderly individuals being evicted from their land. They were city dwellers by the police. They threw tear gas on them. At least it was tear gas and not mustard gas like the fascists did. But from my perspective, to have an Ethiopian, kick out these people who were settlers since the time of the emperor was really unjust. I wasn't in a position to help them. This was right in front of Emperor Menelik's palace. You had military personnel who were protecting the guards of the palace, and then you had about 30 or 40 federal police officers who were there to disband these people who essentially put up makeshift homes because they were priced out and had nowhere else to go. And when I inquired and said, what's going on here, the first thing the individual said was that, we have been here since the time of Emperor Haile Selassie, and we're now being evicted from our lands. So it was very emotional for me. I get emotional speaking about it now. And that was the time I said, I have to launch this movement, and I'm not going to ask the help of anyone. I'll just launch it myself. So I came back to the States. I, incorporated Salassie Stand Up. I used my own funds to launch the movement. I wrote to every African leader to endorse the project. I was working very closely with the former ambassador to the U.S. diplomatic mission of the African Union, Ambassador Erikana Chimbohori, Dr. Erikana, who was very supportive of the project from the get-go, her and her husband as well. And I was able to garner enough support that it sought the attention of even the government of Ethiopia itself, which prior to at least Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's ascension to power, Malla Zenawi, the late Prime Minister, the previous Prime Minister before Abiy Ahmed, was blocking the initiative, and so I had to launch this Pan-African movement, and I knew I would defeat them in the court of public opinion given the emperor's contributions. One doesn't have to be a blood relative of the emperor or biased to showcase on the basis of historical fact what the emperor was able to accomplish in terms of establishing the Organization of African Unity. So, with that support and trust of the leadership, I had, obviously I wrote an article prior to that stating all the reasons why the emperor, should be awarded that accorded with that type of recognition, in terms of being able to negotiate peace between two opposing factions, the Monrovian and Casablanca groups, right? In terms of his contributions by, for making repatriation come into making it a living reality, right? With the land in 48 in Shashamani. He had a Pan-African scholarship where he was trying to foster this sense of African unity amongst our brothers and sisters from other nations, right? Ethiopians nowadays, let alone their history, we are living in ethnic zones where we don't even know our own people, let alone our own African, brothers and sisters. So the emperor back in the 50s was financing this. This predates, if I'm not mistaken, it predates even the American Field Service program, which was implemented during Kennedy's time.
Yes.
And you question, why is the emperor deserving of this recognition? But really the sad thing in Ethiopia is that, and I told this to Ethiopian government officials too in my meeting, that Ethiopia filed suit against the apartheid South African government when they illegally encroached upon territory in Namibia. They partnered with Nigeria and sued in the International Criminal Court of Justice. And but then you fast forward, right? You should think that one would build upon the history and the foundations laid by the emperors. With the fall of communism in 91 and then the implementation of ethno nationalism, we Ethiopians, led by Mullah Zenawi, they really implemented what the colonialists were trying for so many years and were unable to do successfully because of the resistance they faced from emperors who placed their loyalty to country and to crown and to religion above all else, right? And so we imposed on ourselves this system of ethnic federalism or apartheid in a despicable manner, which really makes Ethiopia a laughingstock, a beacon of hope and inspiration for pan-Africanism, the only country not colonized. But it's important to understand that even though Ethiopia wasn't colonized, you have neo-colonialists and Ethiopians who were propped up, right, to continue, right, or to implement what the colonialists weren't, able to accomplish. And that's why you see the secession of Eritrea, the idea of a greater Tigray that, somehow we're ethnically different and shouldn't coexist, and Tigray should be separate. This was a program or plan that came from the British. After the defeat of the Italians, they came in, and their fear was that a free and fair independent Ethiopia would pose a threat to their own colonial holdings in Africa, and therefore they wanted to dismantle Ethiopia and deprive the emperor of having full sovereign rights over his own territory. And that's why he made the move in Eritrea, because Eritrea didn't exist. It's not a country. It's an outlet to a sea, and it was an outlet for our kings. And yet, Mullah Zenawi in 1990, this is a country that has existed for 3,000 years, beyond that, 6,000 years of history, and kings having an outlet to the sea. Eritrea was called Bahara Nagash. Nagash means king.
Yes.
It's a king's sea.
Yes.
But you have neo-colonialists sitting next to each other trying to decide the fate of a nation state, and they implemented that. Mengistu Haile Mariam preached Ethiopianism, but no different from Graziani, who killed 2,000 priests and burned churches. He dismantled the authority of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and took out the Ethiopian monarchy. Right? That's what Italy was trying to do. Yet some Ethiopians today will try to present Mengistu Haile Mariam as an Ethiopianist. He's an anti-Ethiopianist in terms of his action. What is Ethiopianism? Just
and he was a proxy. He was a proxy.
He was a proxy, exactly. And then what did he do? He blamed some of his own officials for engaging with the CIA and defecting or or betraying the state. He was negotiating with the CIA, and they're the ones who paid him off to live in Zimbabwe, and they're paying him handsomely up to this day. So at the end of the day, he didn't stay like Emperor Theodorus. When Emperor Theodorus was what did Emperor Theodorus? He didn't surrender. He turned the gun around him because he wouldn't dare give up his country to foreign invaders. Mengistu was complicit in his own defection, and then he tries to blame the emperor for going to London to advocate for Ethiopian independence. So, and the emperor was able to accomplish that, as we mentioned, Ethiopian World Federation, the first Pan-African organization that mobilized Black people globally, right? That culminated in the defeat of good over evil, right? The emperor wasn't sitting idle, from his home. He was in direct communication with the patriots and was accompanied by patriots who he was in communication. My grandfather was one of them who ended up going to Kenya and then back to Sudan to accompany the emperor upon his reentry.
Please say your grandfather's name so that we can lift him up in the history.
Yeah, Major Lemma Waldazadek was his name. Him and his younger brother, ended up losing his life when they jumped into an enemy trench. They were with Lidj Yasu, the son of Lidj Yasu. Obviously, they were. Well, my great grandfather was a Menelik loyalist, so they were also supporters of Lidj Yasu, and doesn't mean they didn't support Emperor Haile Selassie. My grandfather was very loyal to Emperor Haile Selassie as well. But they, Lidj Yasu was in the battlefield, and they were fighting alongside him when they all jumped into enemy trenches, and then his younger brother passed, but my grandfather kept on marching forward. And so that's just the reality, So we're trying to, through Salassie Stand Up, really speak truth to power. I think that's the hallmark contribution. When the emperor was snubbed of his rightful place in history, we spoke truth to power. Perhaps I wasn't following a proper monarchical protocol, but this was done through Salassie Stand Up, a grassroots initiative. And in the spirit of our fighting Ethiopian ancestors, the warrior kings, that's how this Salassie Stand Up was structured, and it will continue to be structured moving forward.
And you have to be very careful, because I know you also work very closely with the Crown Council, but I know that you're very meticulous in terms of distinguishing when you're wearing a Crown Council hat and when you're operating with Salassie Stand Up, where you have a little bit more freedom. The Crown Council is very conservative, non-political. So we want to make clear that the statements of my brethren Lidj Neb do not always represent the Crown Council. And if it does, then he will make that explicitly clear, because he does do PR work for the Crown Council and has been integral. With the Crown.
Thank you for that disclaimer. The Crown Council, really exists as historically has served as an advisory body of the Solomonic monarchs, and it's led by His Imperial Highness Prince Hermias. It's not structured as a political entity or vehicle. The idea and the mission and interest is to preserve the history, the culture, and the traditions of the Solomonic dynasty, and so he's been doing a great job. My role is really to serve as an advisor to the Crown Council, and to provide any support to Prince Hermias and all members of the Solomonic line, and Ethiopians as well. I, as you said, wear many hats. I have partook in negotiations, discussions to revise the Constitution. I have an initiative under my grandfather, who I mentioned, Major Lemma Waldazadek Memorial Foundation, to restore the green, yellow, red flag. I mean, this is the flag that the heroic generals you mentioned, like Ras Alula, Emperor Johannes, Emperor Menelik, Emperor Haile Selassie, all fought under. The Lion of Judah is insignia of the Solomonic monarchs, so that's our own insignia that reflects the traditions and history and culture of the Solomonic crown, which should continue to exist. But the national flag has always been, green, yellow, and red, with no insignia or no emblem. And so there's a blue circle and a star, a pentagram, which I understand also has some religious connotations. And interestingly, it's actually against the law in Ethiopia to utilize a religious symbol as for a political party, due to the separation of church and state. And so many associate this pentagram with satanic worship.
Yes.
And it kind of, appears that, when you have socialists who are godless and then, the TPLF, who also were Marxist-Leninists, who followed an Albanian modeled socialism, again, the rejection of spirituality and Christianity by virtue of their own political classification, may suggest that what they have on the flag also is a religious symbol, which would be a breach of the current constitution, their own constitution.
Okay.
The struggle there will continue. You can see that, the Fano soldiers who are being attacked by drones and, who are trying to defend their own God-given rights against terrorist organizations, utilize the green, yellow, red flag. And you can see that the third pillar, we had mentioned, the decimation and isolation of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the monarchy, and then the vanguards of these institutions, were contemplated to be the Amara people, which means free people, and so those in Jamaica know, Maroons, right, who lived, right, in the Caribbean and in places in the United States as well, resisted slavery and were free people that roamed around the mountains. Amaras are very similar in that regard as well, and it means free people. And so now they're facing they're at the brunt of a genocide because they're being targeted based on their ethnic identity. If you actually look across various ethnic groups, this is not to suggest that non-Amaras are not pro-Ethiopian, but when you look at the political organizations that were established within Ethiopia, with exception to the Amara group, all of them are anti-Ethiopians. The Eritrean Liberation Front, for example, was established by Cairo, Egypt. It was established in Cairo in Egypt. They were financially backed by various Islamic governments to prevent Ethiopia from emerging as a dominant player in the Horn of Africa, right? When Suez Canal was built, the Ethiopians were not informed. But now the Egyptians think that, although the dam is already built, they think that they have sovereign rights over Ethiopia's rightful use to their own water resources. And so there has been for many, many years they were propping up political groups that pose a threat to the emperors to dismantle the monarchy so they could prop up a government that they could control.
Yes.
And they just trying to use Ethiopian Orthodoxy to accomplish that as well. And so the emperors resisted that, but with the deposition of the monarchy, I think now Ethiopians have been exposed and to this type of to anti-Ethiopianism in general that now has been embedded in the psyche of people who think they're Ethiopian but really don't know what Ethiopia is. To your point, how many Ethiopians would know what Kafukan is? Well, how many Ethiopians would know what even Ethiopia is? That's a more pertinent question. Kafukan is on a different level. That's unfortunately. So that's kind of where we stand. I think through Salassie Stand Up, the idea really is to, again, going along with its mission. The initial phase was to ensure that we would be advancing the interests of the global Black diaspora and descendants of African peoples. But to your question earlier, the emperor really was an international figure, and so now we want to take it to another degree, which doesn't mean we won't focus on issues that are important to the Black diaspora, but that also is part of the global, right? It should be seen within the global context, right? Within the global paradigm. And so, what we would like to do is really take this to the next level in terms of really commemorating the emperor's speech at the League of Nations. Next year, we'll be commemorating the 90th anniversary. Many of you know the speech in 1963 at the United Nations, where the emperor was advocating for freedom and saying that, until colonialism is finally and permanently abolished, we can't say that peace will be able to exist or thrive, right? And that was turned into a song by Bob Marley called "War." That was the emperor's speech, you know, and
Yes.
so the emperor also is deserving of recognition on the international stage. You know, Henry Kissinger received the Nobel Peace Prize. The emperor was nominated, didn't receive one, as he wasn't issued the due respect of a statue initially until we fought for that. You know, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed received the Nobel Peace Prize. You know, so we have to question who are the people behind this that are you know, granting these accolades and giving these forms of recognition to people who frankly are not deserving of them. You know, Henry Kissinger, you know, was the one who really came up with the policy of dismantling Ethiopia as a nation state and taking down his monarchy. So, you know, we can see some of these declassified you know, writings that you know. So we want to continue the legacy. We want to educate the people. You know, we want to be able to speak freely and think freely and speak truth to power. You know, and so what I say behind the screen is also what I repeat when I'm in Ethiopia. For those that may not know, especially Ethiopians who tend to now the modern day Ethiopian will, you know, I apologize for being blunt, is now becoming two-faced, and this is now being accepted as a norm. You know, I told the entire Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ethiopia that the Constitution, the flag, you know, and the national anthem are products of anti-Ethiopianism, and the continuation of neocolonial policies, by definition, make you anti-Ethiopian. So I'm not accusing any individual because I don't know your personal stance, but collectively as a government, you know, that's essentially what is being reflected. You know, when I was in Jamaica some years back, I happened to be walking and I came across in Jamaica. You see the traditional Ethiopian flag, the green, yellow, red, and the Line of Judah flag. I see more flags of Ethiopia in Jamaica than I do in Ethiopia. And interestingly, when I was walking, I saw there was a cannabis shop, and it had the current TPLF flag, like the current flag of Ethiopia with the blue paint and pentagram. And I was shocked because I just never saw that in Jamaica. So I felt compelled to knock on the door and ask to have a discussion with the owner. Interestingly, she was a white American lady from Fairfax, Virginia. There was a Rastafarian Jamaican who I believe they're business partners. And when I questioned them, they couldn't really come up with a response. And she felt so sorry. I said, the people on this island are Rastafarians. They, right, the connection they have with Ethiopia is through the emperor. It's not through ethno-nationalists that, were agents of foreign powers that deposed the emperor. So the very offensive symbol, not only to me, but to the millions of Rastafarians throughout the world. And, I said, I have an initiative to restore the flag, and I would like to start here, and she allowed me to restore it. She said, obviously, this seems like it's an important mission and project of yours. So our intent was not to offend anyone. I think we just, we commissioned a painter to paint different flags of nation states. And it so happened that, we wanted Ethiopia to be reflected, and this is the flag he chose. So educating people is important, and also, feeling the ownership, right, and the need to affect change, I think, is an important thing, right? We can take the knowledge we have to our grave. We can take the riches we've amassed, however big or small, to our grave. But if we can't partake in something bigger, then it really becomes, life really becomes a journey of futility. So Salassie Stand Up really comes from that perspective. We want to partner with the Rastafarian community. We want to partner with our African brothers and sisters. We want to partner with all people throughout the world to really highlight the work and contributions of His Majesty, and to really bring Ethiopianism back to the forefront, because we're deserving of it, and we should strive for no less.
Give thanks. So these are worthy causes. Definitely, we're going to open the platform for you to come forward and keep us posted on your efforts, restoring the flag, erecting other statues commemorating important events on the calendar. These are all very worthy. I know the global Rastafari community would be in full support of your efforts. So again, consider us to be a resource for your initiatives. There you have it, family. We are at the 2 hour mark. I do have a Naya Bingi to attend. Today is July 23rd. So you know that this is a big day of celebration. I could not bring my brethren here to talk about the history. We had to do something special for this great day for the Lion Pride. That shows how much I love this community that we're building. I want to give a special shout out to Coach Tommy. We just added Coach Tommy as a member of our Patreon. He just came on board at the mission supporter level. Big up yourself, Coach Tommy. We're gonna have our town hall meeting on Sunday for our Patreon supporters. So if you want to join us, like-minded people who love the emperor, who are Pan-African, who want to see a change, join our Patreon. And in our last town hall meeting, you can watch the town hall meetings for free on our Patreon if you join as a free member. On our last town hall meetings, one of the things that the Patreon family said is that they wanted to see more Ethiopians on the platform. They wanted to see more people who, knew the emperor, more elders. And as you see, we listen. So if you want to help shape the direction of this platform and build with us, join us in the Patreon. We also making it available for single brethren and sisters to meet their themselves, and we're hoping some marriages will come out of there. We're building a virtual village there in the Patreon, and it's a beautiful way to just interact with professional, serious people, who are contributing to Rastafari Independent Non-Aligned Media. So that's going to be Sunday. If you want to join us on Sunday, you got to join as a paid member, but we welcome you. Again, you can go and watch. We've had 2 town hall meetings already. You can watch them for free if you join as a free member, and see if it's something that you're interested in over on Patreon. But big up yourself, Coach Tommy. He just joined while we were here live. So again, we're trying to get to 100 people as our first phase in the Patreon. We're still a ways off. I was trying to get there by July 23rd. We're coming to that cutoff date and we're way behind. So join us so that we can continue to build this platform. This is just our first phase. Lidj Nebyat, we're building a crowd funded model. Because I say that the only way to really stay independent is when you're funded by your audience.
Right.
Because if you're dependent on sponsorship, whoever writes the checks, they call the shots. That's how business works. So I would rather be funded by my global audience. That allows us to be independent, not aligned. That allows us to talk about what we feel like talking about. You heard the brethren burning some hot fire. If I had a big sponsor, maybe they call me and say, you got to take that down because it's too controversial. They may be supporters of the pentagram on the flag. We don't know. But we want to stay independent. So I big up everybody who sees the vision and what we can accomplish. Again, today, we're going to be putting up an interview exclusive. And I want to thank my brother here, Lidj Neb, who made the connection with Prince Afsa Olsen. This is big, massive interview that we had over 2 hours with Ras Kassa's grandson, the great Ras Kassa, who the most loyal of all of the royal princes of Ethiopia was Ras Kassa. Never betrayed his majesty, not once. And he had what many would consider a superior claim to the throne than the claim of Ras Makonnen. So his story is epic. We talked to his grandson who knew his majesty personally, many personal testimonies. He talks about what His Majesty did to cement the OAU. He has a book, King of Kings, that we're going to be featuring on the platform as well. So stay tuned for that interview tomorrow. We will release the first clip from that interview. Patreon, you'll get the whole interview immediately, but the rest of you will get the clips as we share it little by little. So definitely we are on our way to fulfilling the wish of our Patreon family that we build that bridge with Ethiopia. And my brother here today, although it's not his first time, is just us moving in that direction, and he's going to help us to make the connections with a lot more. And I told them I want the elders, because we want to catch the story from their own mouth. We want to hear what their interactions with His Majesty were like, what the king, these antidotes, once they're gone, they're gone. We can't get them back, because if they don't share it, then we will never know unless it's written in a book. And many of them have not written books, so whatever we can preserve for future generations, and especially for us as Rastafari, we want to preserve it. So I want to thank you once again, my brother, for coming on the platform and being so transparent and sharing, for stepping into the time machine and granting us this epic story that is part of your ancestry. Do you have any final words for the global Rastafari and Pan-African family before we seal up?
Yeah, I mean, I just, I love my Rastafarian people. Every chance I get, I like to bring up the fact that, really, in many ways, they're the true vanguards of Pan-Africanism, and clearly the life and legacy of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie. And so we're very grateful and thankful for the support that Rastafarians have accorded not only to members of the imperial family and direct descendants of Emperor Haile Selassie, but for also being a vanguard and protector and defender of Ethiopianism in the most troubling times. And I know this is a sentiment that's shared widely amongst all members of the family and the Ethiopian people as well. So thank you very much. And this is really just the beginning in terms of the partnership and work that we have in store. So we need to come together, form partnerships, alliances, work together, work strategically, work smarter. And thank you, Kwasi, really for all the work that you've been doing in terms of, uplifting our people. And you're someone who should actually be on the receiving end of these questions. Not only a lawyer and historian and intellectual, but your knowledge of Ethiopia is really second to none, Ethiopian history in particular. And if you haven't bought his book, buy his book. Prince Ermias, wrote a forward to the book. It was very impressive. The accounts, the information, really that's in that book. You can extract a lot more than you can from me and many other intellectuals and professors of Ethiopian history through through a 1 or 2 hour show like this. So get his book, educate yourself. Reach out to him, reach out to me. Salassie Stand Up at gmail.com. Periodically checking the site, we're revamping the website, and we'll have initiatives. We'll rely heavily on the Rastafarian community to help get things moving. So thank you very much again for the invite and for the opportunity. Happy Earth Strong to His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie, 133rd Earth Strong. So we're grateful. It was great being on here, and thank you again.
133 years of glory, honor, and majesty. We celebrate with our global family around the world. Kadamawi, Haile, Selassie, Ye'alem, Berhan, Anacho, the great King of Kings, the greatest world leader to ever live. We are here with Prince of the Royal Bloodline, sharing the story. Why? because the time has come for the lions to tell our own story. And this is the lion's voice.
Greetings, this is Warrior King, and the time has come for the lions and the lioness to tell their own story. This is the lion's voice. Give thanks and prayer.
What are you waiting for? Come together, calling from near and far. Know who you are. What are you waiting for? Rally up, it's Exodus. What are you waiting for? Ancestors paved the way for us. Yes, I am Ketis Oyonde, asking, what are you waiting for to come together? The time has come for the lions to tell our own story. This is the lion's voice.
Yeah, now the time has come for the lion to tell his own story. Yeah, the one them called Celestial I represent for the mighty lion voice. And this a shook up your planet tectonic. As me sip up my roots and tectonic. And you can't make me jump nor get panic. Of the engine a run like mechanic room.
The time has come for the lioness to tell her own story.
The time has come for lions to tell our own story. Yes, you're listening to Lion's Voice. I is Ras Alula hailing from the island of St. Croix. Yeah, I'm bringing to you Rastafari vibes. Can you feel it? Rastafari. Babylon born when Rasta come together. Can you feel it? Rastafari. Because Babylon done when I and I come together. Look how we live together, Look how we work together, Whoa, Babylon done when Rasta come together. Haile, Rastafari, His Majesty and Empress Men in Bless. Yeah man, hail from Rastafari, Rastafari, I hear you. Love,
Aye.
The fittest of the fittest shall survive. My people, open your eyes. Wake up. Blessed love, this is Queen Omega, representing for all lions and lionesses. With the lion's voice, we come to tell our story. Rastafari, live it. Hey, the lion's voice. Rastafari.
Alright, listen to me now, people. The lion roar, no dog bark. See? The lion's voice with Kwasi Bonsu. Time right now for the lion to tell his story. See? Listen up.
Haile.
Amina, the time has come for the lioness to tell our own story. No surrender, no retreat, we are Jaja soldier. Rougher than the streets, tougher than a boulder. Bigging up Lamb's voice. Now put it, I Johnny for said that.
Greetings, this is Ras Alula. The time has come for the lions to tell their own story. See? This is the lion's voice. Keep it locked, right, sir? Ras Alula said that. Are you satisfied? Wipe those tears from your eyes. I'm all alone, still you thought I was telling a lie. This is the lion's voice. Keep it locked, right, sir?
I will never stop, hail the Most High, and I will never stop, call Rastafari. Blessed love, this is Kushite representing for the Lion's Voice. We are here to tell our own story, Rastafari.
Yeah, David Dread of Steel Pulse, and I'm saying hail to Lion Voice because it's time that the lion have its voice, have its own story. Says I'm stepping out here. Hear me now. Yeah, the lion's voice. Raw.
Lion voice, tell them that's the people first choice. Lion voice, make the lioness them feel nice. Lion voice, with the lion cubs we sacrifice. Lion voice, got to show the people them the life. Lion voice.